All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. Welcome, y'all, to the King Moolah TV podcast. My name is King. Let's see what we got going on here. All right. Today's topic is definitely a big one. It's seemingly it seems like it's taboo right now, and I don't know why. In this country it seems like it's taboo to talk about it, but not at the same time. It's just a weird, like, for me, just personally how I feel about it. It just feels like it's a weird space. With where it is, like you can see, like I think, um, well, let me say this topic first. Okay, the topic is systematic racism, and this is just yeah, it's gonna be basically breaking down what that is and how we see it, and then this is also an episode that is gonna break into like more episodes because it's just so deep, and there's just so much to talk about when it comes to this that you have to hmm that you have to just break it down. It's really that there's just so much information on it and so much history behind it where you just have to break it down, and where you see it. It's not only in the history books. So systematic racism, also known as institutionalized racism, um, and also can just be racism in general, which you can just say that. But systematically, this is just what it's been for a really, really long time, centuries even. So without further ado, let's figure out, not figure out, but I'm gonna tell you guys what it is, what systematic racism is. Okay, first I'm gonna define it using internet definitions, probably from Oxford or Merriam-Webster. So we'll just get into that right now. So Merriam-Webster, well, probably Oxford is gonna pop up first, but or Wikipedia pops up first. That's fine too. Institutionalized Wikipedia says institutional racism, also known as systematic racism, is defined as policies and practices that exist throughout a whole society or organization that result in and support a continued unfair advantage to some people, and or harmful treatment of others based on race or ethnic group. It manifests as discrimination in areas such as criminal justice, employment, housing, healthcare, education, and political representation. Did y'all get that? It's quite a definition, but that's pretty much what it is. It spreads so far and wide into the justice system or the legal system, uh, employment, housing, healthcare, education. Oh, all over, all over, basically all over the areas of the industries that pretty much make up a society that is, um, yeah, just a society that, well, I could say it's a society that's in well, pretty much what makes up a society. Um, how to deal with troublemakers, working, how what's everybody's job, housing, where everybody lives, healthcare, how to help when everybody is needs some medical care, some medical aid, education, how we learn, political representation, who we put in charge. So pretty much it's everywhere all over, man. Everywhere all over. And they probably didn't even mention all the other stuff, but it's pretty much ingrained in our society, especially in US of A. Okay? So that's Wikipedia definition, and honestly, well, they pretty much explain it. I was gonna say my own personal definition, but that's pretty much the nail on the head. The only thing I'm gonna add to is like it like I said, it was all over. It's ingrained in every part of society. It's like really it's ingrained so much that it almost seems like it's normal, and it really is not normal at all. It's not sustainable for those who are disproportionately affected by it. It is an unfair practice, and it happens all across the board in all these industries, like music as well. Like even though music industry is uh um primarily black, because most of the genres are started by black people, if not all the genres. Yeah, if not all the genres, like a overwhelming majority is started by black people, but that's not what the topic is today. But yeah, it's all across. It's in media as well. I did want it to call this the media episode, but no, I think to that will have to come afterwards. So I gotta call systematic racism what it is first, and then later on in other episodes I get to break it down, because each episode dealing with systematic racism is gonna have a lot more information packed into it, instead of just this is just the introduction of systematic racism and the history, just a brief history for this episode. But we're gonna talk about some things. We're gonna get into some things. So it's just generally covering everything in this episode. So Wikipedia pretty much said how I wanted to say it. Now, like I mentioned, so it's institutional racism, also known as systematic racism. Same thing, interchangeable. Um, how these things show up in our everyday life? Well, they pretty much we glossed over that in the definition. In the legal system, employment, housing, healthcare, education, political representation, in our entertainment, it really does. Um, it really is embedded in our society, and it's been happening for a while. So let me just give you some brief history on that. I guess I'll use Wikipedia since they came out the gate with a really good a really good definition. Let's see. We can say the term. We can go into the origin of the term. It was first coined, the term institutionalized racism, coined in 1967 by Stokely Carmichael and Charles V. Hamilton in Black Power: The Politics of Liberation. Carmichael and Hamilton wrote in 1967 that while individual racism is often identifiable because of its overt nature, overt meaning open, like you can see it, it's easily seen. Institutionalized racism is less perceptible because of its less overt, far more subtle nature. Less overt meaning a lot more closed off, a little it's harder to see, difficult to determine or to distinguish between. So there's overt racism and covert racism. The best example for most people, I think I can give for most people is um the two parties, they both practice racism. The two major parties, they both practice racism. Okay, both of them do. One party is overt, I mean they're open about their racism. I'm pretty sure everybody has a good idea of what that is. And other major party is covert about it, meaning that they make it seem like they're not, but they really are, when they pretty much showing how their impact are impacting the disenfranchised every day. And And when we talk about racism, we're 100%. I'm 100% talking about the racism towards black people. Okay? The racism towards black people. All right, let's go into a little more history. Institutionalized racism originates in the operation of established and respected forces in the society and thus receives far less public condemnation than individual racism. So, individual racism is usually, if you see those videos of what we call Karens or, you know, those type of people who like to uphold a certain standard of bigotry, that's really just individual racism. So that's not a big. It's not the grand scheme of. It's not systematic racism. That's just on an individual basis, on a personal basis, like what you would see if you would walk out and it would happen to you personally. That's what the individual racism is, and it does tie into systematic racism because even though it's overt, like systematic racism can be overt as well, but it's mostly covert because they have it ingrained in society to where it is normal. And like I'm saying, it is not normal. It is for, there's something I want to point out. I guess I'll point it out right now. What is common to you is not common to everybody else. What is normal to you is not normal to everybody else. Okay, what's actually supposed to be normal is actually just something that's common around you in your area, in your neighborhood, or yeah, in your community. That's just what I want to point out for right now because definitely want to do an episode dealing with the difference between what's common and what's normal because there is a distinguishable. They can be very similar, but you got to be able to tell the difference. And I'm definitely going to break that down. So, what I was saying, okay, here's another definition. Something else was definition of institutionalized racism, still on Wikipedia, but they said another person in the UK in the Lawrence Report in 1999. His name is Sir William Mac Macpherson. Um, says the collective failure of an organization to provide an appropriate and professional service to people because of their color, culture, or ethnic origin. It can be seen or detected in processes, attitudes, and behavior that amount to discrimination through prejudice, ignorance, thoughtlessness, and racist stereotyping, which disadvantage minority ethnic people. Okay. I'm glad I read this because now it brings up something that I should definitely bring up in this episode because it's definitely going to play into all the other episodes dealing with systematic racisms in their respective industries. In pretty much all the industries that I'm going to break it down in. All right. So, pretty much stereotypes. Stereotypes are what do we call stereotypes show up a lot in racism. And let me just tell you the definition of racism, because I should definitely start with that first. The definition of racism is actually very, very simple. Institutionalized racism is just dealing with it is pretty much spread across the board and ingrained in society, as I said before. But racism in general, like the base definition of racism, is very simple. It is power plus prejudice. And what prejudice is basically stereotypes depicting behaviors on a certain demographic of people, okay? On a certain demographic. How these people act, how they believe these people act. These are negative, typically negative stigmas about people. These are what stereotypes are. This is what prejudice is. Prejudice can be flipped on the other side, but it's usually never. When we talk about prejudice, it's always negative. Talk about bias, negative. Usually, if we're, especially if we're dealing with racism and systematic racism, all of that negative. Um, let's see. If we're talking about stereotypes, negative usually, and even if some of them are positive, they can also be negative based on how it is projected out onto other people. Okay, so when I'm talking about racism or systematic racism, stereotypes is 100% going to be sprinkled all over the place. It's ingrained in society. It's shown in um, through like microaggressions. Okay, and what microaggressions are these it's behavior towards certain people based on prejudice, you know based on yeah, the stereotypes that they were taught about certain demographic of people. And I'm gonna just say black people right now because that's exactly what I'm talking about. When I talk about racism, I'm more than likely going to be hinting towards black people most of the time. Okay, New Oxford defines microaggression as a statement, action, or incident regarded as an instance or of indirect, subtle, or unintentional discrimination against members of a marginalized group such as a racial or ethnic minority. There it is. There it is, yo. And if you want to know an example of microaggressions, I won't dive too deep into it. Let's see. A racial microaggression. It would be, why do you have to be so loud or animated? Just calm down. Okay. The microaggression, that's the microaggression. That's it. This is saying asking a black person. This is from the it's an education. It's like a University of Minnesota School of Public Health. That's where I'm getting that from. This example from. Um and the message basically, by saying why do you have to be so loud and animated, just calm down, is pretty much assimilate to a dominant culture, leave your cultural baggage outside or outside of their facilities and establishments. Like you can't show up as yourself, and pretty much every marginalized group has to assimilate to the dominant culture. Okay, and that's just how it is. That's just how society has been for centuries. In order for us to survive, in order for us to move without much problems, with less problems, not without much problems, with less problems. At least we try to do that with less problems. Right now this is the time we are fighting back because we there's a lot more freedom to do so. So we have a lot more power to do so if that's what it is. So, but that's what microaggression is. How it ties into institutionalized racism is, institutionalized racism. It is a very, hmm, like it is so much. Like you can see it. It once you like understand what it is, you will you can easily see it throughout every industry. Like it's just a lot of this just ties so much into how our society behaves towards black people. It is very, very sad, but You know, it will change as long as we give it the time and give it the and give um and never stop talking about it, because it is something that we need to continuously talk about. Because if we don't talk about it, then people think that, oh, it's been solved. That's pretty much what the general consensus is, that if we don't talk about it, oh, it's been solved, or it doesn't mean, it doesn't have any value or meaning anymore. That's usually what it is. And honestly, we can't have that happening. All right. There's a lot of things that institutionalized racism go into, but let me just show y'all. Let me just tell you guys how to deal with it sometimes. Not sometimes, but how you deal with it. At least in a general sense, because I did not, excuse me. Like I did not cover too much into it. I just glossed over most of them because this is what it is. It's only the introduction to what is going to be broken down later on. So how do you deal with what I said? That it's in every industry. I think I did say one of the solutions earlier. Never stop talking about it. Always give it a platform, give it the space in the room where we talk with our amongst ourselves as black people and with other races and cultures and ethnicities, and have them understand that this is a problem that we see throughout society. And I know a lot of them may or may not support or may not want to talk about it, but it still needs to be talked about. Just like how in Palestine, like it still needs to be talked about. It is it is something that is very concerning in the state of our society, our world, in the world community. It is something that still that needs to be talked about, even though like it feels like some people just want to forget about it as if it doesn't matter, and it does. A lot of people are hurt by it, and it needs to be rectified, and it needs to be shown that we as a society need to progress, because we are not progressing. More like we're regressing, or we're just in a standstill. And when people are in a standstill, they don't know which direction they need to go. Somebody has to show them that we need to move forward. We got to move forward. So yeah, so never stop talking about it, because that's as general as I can be. That's always going to be the point, to never stop talking about it until it's solved. And even if it's solved, we still got to talk about it, because it's a part of the history. It's a part of our history. So it's something that we should never forget. That's why we have history books, and this is why we talk about these things of what happened back in the day, what happened, 60 years ago, 100 years ago, 400 years ago, 1600 years ago. This is something that is that we need to keep talking about, keep pushing forward, keep fighting back. This is use your voice. It is so important. I know some people don't think that their voice is that important, but it is. It really is. It really is. When it comes to systematic racism, you have to be able to distinguish. You have to be able to talk about it, even if it is uncomfortable for the people who feel like they don't want to hear it, or for those who, even if it's uncomfortable for you, you still keep talking about it, because it is such a good thing. You got to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, and we've been uncomfortable our whole lives as black people. You know, so just we might as well be talking about it. Honestly, we should be talking about it. It's a lot to talk about when it comes to this stuff. There's so much history that involves systematic racism that we have to never stop talking about it. It's so much history that is hidden that isn't even in our history books, in our, excuse me, public school history books, that they don't even acknowledge. They omit a lot of this information. They omit it. and you have to look for it for yourself. And it is our responsibility to look into these things because having them give us the information, the only thing they should really be giving us is how to basically read, how to write, and how to do math and this, that, and the other. When it comes to, and it honestly, they should be teaching us how to research. It shouldn't only be just in college because it's where I learned how to research a little bit more deeply. But you got to be able to look into things for yourself. Yeah, like I said, like I keep saying, everybody has some form of a supercomputer in their pocket, in their house, or at a friend's house or something. The time that we spent more on entertainment, it can be done doing some research. It does not take a lot. It does not take a lot. Most, if any, the information is readily available, and it's not something you really have to dig for like that. Not something you really have to dig for at all. Like seriously, it's literally right in our faces. When I type in certain things, all this stuff pops up to me right on the front page. Okay, it does not take a lot. You just have to be willing to look for it, and you have to be passionate about learning the true history of this nation, of this world. Okay, because institutionalized racism is everywhere. It's everywhere. That's what is institutionalized is. Okay, that's why we have to. Gonna say it again because never stop talking about it. I have to emphasize this. Never stop talking about it. It is ingrained in us, in our society, so it's something that we need to be talking about. This is exactly why I'm talking about it because I feel like even though it's being talked about in other spaces, in my space it should be talked about because it has been a big interest for me and it's also affected me too as well. So I cannot, like, it's my responsibility to do so. We have a responsibility to tell the truth. We have a responsibility to tell the true history. There's no point in to not do that. There's no point in not doing that because what's the point if you're not going to say anything about it? Then you're pretty much acknowledging that you don't think it exists or you don't care that it exists. You should always care about the truth. You should care about um you should care about history because that's a part of who you are, even if it's your individual upbringing or if it's world history. You should care about it at least a little bit. This stuff is very important because you can't just have only people who want to be historians and who want to be scholars and world travelers. They shouldn't be the only ones with this knowledge. It should be your every common day man should have some form of this knowledge to be able to determine and distinguish what it is when they see it in their own lives. So I'm telling y'all, this is something to be passionate about. You can get into all kinds of things with institutionalized racism, all kinds of facts and man, there's so many events, all types of knowledge about this, about institutionalized racism, systematic racism. Being institutionalized. Oh, did I? Oh wait, no. Yeah, I did say the legal system, but yeah, it shows up everywhere. Um, yeah, and like I said, I will be breaking it down. In the other industries and how it shows up. So you know, you're definitely gonna stay tuned for that because it's gonna be a lot. That's why you got to keep breaking it down so that it's digestible to people, easily understood. One thing I want to do is just make it easy to understand. Okay, because I don't want to use all these big. That's why I like to define things so that you like get a good understanding of what you're hearing. Okay, that is why I don't want to say, use my huge vocabulary, and then knowing that most people do not have the huge vocabulary that I have, or can read the huge vocabulary, can understand the huge vocabulary. Even if I was to say the word, um, most people wouldn't really know. So, yeah. So, yeah. Institutionalized racisms, never stop talking about it. Always seek the knowledge to know and understand and apply to your lives if necessary. Okay? All right, so yeah, that pretty much wraps up the episode of institutionalized racism. I'm your host, King. Stay hydrated. Absolutely. You know, stay seeking information. We all got supercomputers somewhere. Somewhere in our lives, somewhere we do. And if you don't, well, you can have a regular computer, because if it's not super, then it could be regular. That's fine too. I'm pretty sure it can get the job done. Just wait and have patience. All right? Yep. Stay hydrated. You guys have a good day. I'll see ya on the next one. See ya.